Hello and welcome to Exceptional Board Members Take It to the Next Level, a webinar from the Nonprofit Coach team. I am Elizabeth Finlayson. I am the CEO and lead coach of the Nonprofit Coach, and my personal mission is to create a fairer, more equitable, and inclusive world filled with empathy and beauty. And my team and I do this by supporting our nonprofit clients with strategic planning, fundraising training, and support. So let's find out what is it we're actually doing here this morning. So this is part of a bi-monthly webinar series I started when the pandemic hit. So what had happened at that point is I had this sinking feeling where I realized that this is going to be the third recession that I have fundraised through, and that I had learned things through the last two recessions that probably most nonprofits really wouldn't have a chance to know unless they had also fundraised through those times. And many nonprofits are new or small, or they've had turnover in staff and don't have access to that same information. At the same time, I am also part of Network for Good. And I had access to a whole bunch of really intelligent fundraising coaches who were getting information nationally and looking at research and looking at what was working in real time. And so I was better able to share that information with people that I work with. And so these webinars, these free monthly webinars, came out of a desire to share the information that I knew at that time and to keep getting that in front of people as much as possible. It was successful, so I've continued it for what is now a year. And so let me just share what they are and what they are not. We tend to either do a very general topic overview, or we dive deep and specific into a slice of a broader topic. They're not meant to replace any kind of paid training that you're doing in your own organizations, any deeper work that you're doing, but really to get you started on the path, particularly when organizations maybe don't have resources or they're just looking for a refresher. That's the level of information that we're looking to get for these. Many of these topics you could spend weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks on. And particularly today, we're talking about board effectiveness, right? So we know we could probably be in 4 board retreats a year and deepen the quality and effectiveness of our board. But I hope to just kind of get you launched a little bit into looking into that for yourselves. We also frequently have guest speakers, and so we do have some webinars coming up with some great guest speakers. I'm going to admit some more people to today's webinar. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is a poll, and this is actually my first time doing a poll in this setting, so please bear with me. But if you just take a moment and answer, what is your nonprofit role currently? Are you a board member or a staff member? Are you thinking about joining a board or volunteer or something else? So I'm going to launch that. Great. Got a lot of board members here. We have some nonprofit staff members, it looks like. A few volunteers. We have an other. I'd love to hear if you want to chat out what other is for you. Great. I'm going to end the polling here, and I'm going to share out the results. So if you can see that, we're showing that most of the people here today are board members themselves. A few people are staff members, probably looking to how to best support their board members. And I'm really excited. Those of you who are considering joining a board or volunteers or other, this is a great way to really get to understand what the expectations are. One of the things that I do find happens in nonprofits is there is not a real full sharing of expectations between the staff and the board. And I think that sometimes leads us to have less effective relationships with our board and less effective results for our nonprofits. So this is a great way to get to know what you could be asking your nonprofit and what you can be finding out. All right, let's keep going. All right, so this is our staff member here, Tina, and she wants to know why we are talking about boards today. And so the thing is that boards are fundamental to a well-functioning organization. I know that that seems really obvious, but I think when you're on the staff side, you're very consumed with the day-to-day activities. You're worried about your program participants. You're worried about your effectiveness. You're worried about the next funder. And when you are worried about your board, you're wondering, are they going to do some of the things that you want them to do? And you're worried about looking good for those people at the next meeting. But the truth is that high-level functioning that a board member provides and that group of board members is really, truly essential to an effective fundraising organization, to an effective nonprofit organization that's meeting the needs of its participants and fulfilling its mission. So let's go through, we're going to look at what are they supposed to be doing. So here is our board member, and his name is Stanley. He's in his 50s. He's been in business for 30 years. He is risen to a high-level manager position at his company. He's smart, knowledgeable, and committed. So he sounds like a perfect board member, right? He has business knowledge. He's committed to our mission, so there isn't any concern there about him doing, missing a lot of meetings or whatever is there. What do you think about how he could be for our organization? Do you think he's going to be effective or not effective? You can just give me a thumbs up in your reactions if you think he's going to be a great board member. Thumbs down if you don't think he could be a great board member. All right, so we've got a thumbs up so far. Okay, and let's just see, here is the real dilemma that happens with nonprofit organizations is that he's never been a board member, he's never worked at a nonprofit, and he's never asked his friends or family for money. He may know about sales and customers and marketing, he may be strategic, he may be business oriented, but he may not have all the tools he needs to succeed in his role. We know that he's a fantastic candidate. We know that he has a desire to make an impact. So if he's my board member, the onus comes to me is, how am I going to help Stanley to be the best board member that he can be? So let's look at how the nonprofit model is different from the corporate model. You can really look at, there's some really interesting differences here that are obvious, but when you look deeper, you can see what the impact of them may be. So in the nonprofit model, your board of directors are volunteers, right? So they are not paid. They are doing this work outside of their other commitments. They often don't have nonprofit experience. They're often being recruited to a board because they have business experience, law experience, real estate experience. They have a deep commitment to the youth you're serving, for example, but they often don't have nonprofit experience. If you contrast that with a corporate model, the board of directors are paid often quite well, and they have relevant experience. That's why they're being asked to be part of that board. Here's another thing that happens in the nonprofit model. The end users are people who are using the products and services of that organization, and the people paying for it are separate groups of people. So this really creates two main target audiences that a nonprofit is always trying to work between. In a corporate model, it's typical that the end users and the payers are the same person, and they are known as customers, right? And we're very familiar with that model. If you're pleasing your customer, they are providing money, and then you make more of the thing that they want, and you sell that, and you get more customers. It doesn't work that way with nonprofits, and so nonprofits are always balancing these two main target groups, and so it's really important to think about that as you're helping to run a nonprofit. Nonprofits are often underfunded. This can be for a lot of reasons, but one of the things is also a mindset we have about nonprofits and how they spend their money and what is appropriate to spend their money on. So this is often causing the staff to, quote unquote, do more with less. And that's often different from working in a corporate setting in which hopefully there is appropriate money for the work that they're doing. And if you look at that last bullet point, that the business development activities are considered essential to the growth. Of course, we're going to spend money on that consultant. Of course, we're going to add that extra staff person. Of course, we're going to analyze our business practices and see if they're working. Otherwise, how do we keep growing and keep getting more money? But if you're looking at a nonprofit when you feel like you don't have enough for the essential staff, there's very little attention to business development activities. And so that has an impact on the staff side and on the board side. So we're going to look a little bit more deeply at that. So let's now look at the basic roles and responsibilities of the board member. I often find these are not spelled out for board members before they get there. Or if they are, you might be handed a really large binder of documents when you start at your board organization, and they may not have a lot of relevance to the regular activities that you're doing at the nonprofit. So we're going to break this down a little bit more. So I'm going to show here 4 main areas that are part of the role of the board of directors. So let's start with this, and then we're going to break it down a little bit farther into what these actually mean. So the first one is governance and compliance, mission and vision, HR functions, human resources, and finance. So let's look a little bit more deeply. So if we're looking at governance and compliance, we're looking at, are you following the laws that are related to running a nonprofit in your state, in your area, under the federal government? Are you following ethical guidelines? Do you have effective organizational planning? Do you know where you're going? Do you know what you're supposed to be doing? Do you have structures in place to support your board in growing appropriately? If we look at the mission, often when you join an organization, they already have a mission statement and a purpose, and they have that well defined. So this might be an area where you might be thinking, well, we don't actually do very much with that. But if you look then at the programs and the services, I'm hoping that at a lot of your meetings are going to be program updates, and that whether it's something you're expressing externally or it's internally, you're really looking at how is that matching your mission. And there might be a little red flag that goes off for you if someone's suggesting a program that's really far away from the defined mission of the organization. You also might find every few years you're revisiting that mission. You might find that you've grown or changed in ways that that mission is maybe more narrow than it used to be, or there's also trends in missions. Right now, mission statements are getting shorter and clearer. Rather than trying to define through every clause and phrase of several sentences everything that your organization is doing, you want to be really straightforward about what your organization's purpose is. So those are the things that you're going to be defining and doing as part of a board. The HR, I think that this tends to get skipped in organizations, and you can kind of chat it out to me if you find this is so or not. This hiring and the supporting of the chief executive director, really assessing their performance. A lot of executive directors are not getting annual performance reviews like the rest of the staff are. So that should be part of that process, and ensuring overall staff oversight and morale. So how is the organization doing overall? Do you have high turnover numbers? That would be something you would want to look at as a board. You do not want to be going and sitting in the office with the junior marketing director and telling them what kind of email to send. It's not that level of oversight. It's really a high level oversight, looking at those strategic directions. And then let's look at finance. I'm going to imagine that this might be where you're spending a lot of time as a board. I hope you're providing financial oversight. I hope that you're looking over those documents. I hope that you're asking questions when you don't know what something means. I can't tell you how important it is to understand your own organization's financials. And if something isn't clear, to really just keep asking questions until you know. This is part of your fiduciary responsibility as a board member, and the financial well-being of the organization is in your hands. So that's really important. And then this last bullet, which does take a lot of our time as an organization, is to ensure adequate resources for fundraising. So I am going to move now to a new poll, and I want to find out which of those 4 areas we described is most challenging for your board currently, for your organization. So let's move to the next one.
Actually, I have a question while we're taking this poll. What resources do you recommend for people who, for boards who might be like a small organization that don't really have like a lot of these things well defined? You mentioned like having a binder or a packet of information, but like, what if, we don't even have any of that? I mean, like, it's on the website, but how would we compile, I guess, a good set of information for new board members that might come in the future?
It's a really excellent question, Andrew. I'm going to give you a little bit more, and then I'm going to end the polling. But I would say a fantastic resource on the internet is called BoardSource. They have things that are behind a paywall that you really have to pay and become a member to get, but they have a lot of free resources, including template board job descriptions and some policies on there. I highly, highly recommend checking that out and getting some basics under your belt. I'm going to end polling now, and we're going to share results. This is not surprising to me that finance is the biggest challenge. There's a reason I came up through fundraising. It really is just something that we all have to spend our time and attention on. But it is also, people underestimate sometimes how important the HR functions are. It's one of those things with HR, if it's not working, you will know, right? All of a sudden there's a lot of conflict, people are having trouble getting along, or you're going through a position over and over and over again, you have lots of turnover. Mission and vision, that can be critical, and sometimes people have a hard time deciding on those things, or there's a lot of conflict around those as well. So I'm going to stop sharing results here, and I'm just going to check on the chat for a second. Some people are jumping in. Oh, someone put board source into the chat, so I appreciate that. Oh, thank you very much. All right, we're going to keep moving here. So I have spent almost all my time, I have been on a board as well as on a founding board of an organization, but most of my time has been on the staff side and advising organizations. And so there's frequently this emphasis on what the organization is asking of the board member. But as I'm talking to you, I really want you to know what you should be asking of your organization. So let's look at some of these things here. So this number one, this first bullet of clear fundraising expectations, if your organization has not spelled that out for you, do not be tricked into thinking that they don't have fundraising expectations for you. This is often where I see problems develop between the nonprofit and the board member, is that people either do not set their expectations in the recruitment process, they're not clear about that, or they excuse people from things. If somebody says, oh, I'm not going to be a fundraiser, it's just not something I do, they'll say yes, but in reality, they really need that person to do that, and they spend the rest of the time being frustrated. So number one here is really ask for those clear fundraising expectations. Figure out for yourself if you can meet them, if you can do those things. Ask for training to be able to do them if that's what's necessary for you, and then go from there. But it's really critical that you get that clarified in the recruitment process. And if that doesn't happen for you and you're on the board, go to them now and really ask them what they're looking for. Board orientation, this is something that a lot of organizations skip, where they think, oh, because you met with the board chair and we sent you these documents, you've got it. And I think this is really not true. And we're not setting our board members up for the most effective term that we can. I'll give you a good example. The first nonprofit I ever worked for as a staff member had a really well-defined story. And they had an excellent orientation process for all staff members that came in that lasted, I think, something like 3 days. And during that time, they had people from each department meet and talk about finances. They talked about marketing. They talked about these different parts. So when you came out, you just had a crash course on the functioning of the organization. But one of the things they did really, really well was tell the origin story of the organization. And I have a visual picture in my mind to this day of that origin story. And it allowed me to then go out and be a speaker on behalf of the organization, even though at the time I was 22 years old and probably knew nothing. I was able to do that because the training had been so effective. How many times as board members are we being asked to invite people to things, to talk about the organization, to bring it up with our friends, and we haven't been given a clear story. We haven't been given training. So really, I think it behooves the organization to have a good orientation process in place. And if that's not happening, your governance committee, which we're also going to talk about, let that be something that they're charged with creating, and that they can create an orientation that becomes part of the board development. If one of the things I'd love to see you get out of your board term is for you to develop as a board leader and to get everything you can of the experience while you were giving everything you can. I've said a lot on that bullet. Annual meeting calendar. this is something that for a lot of organizations, you get that calendar and you find out when your meetings are, but I know that some organizations don't do that. And it's just important that you know when the meetings are and the expectations for attending them. It is required that you get meeting documents before your meetings. And so again, making sure your organization is sending those a few days before it's the minimum so that you have a chance to read those and you can really live up to your fiduciary duty as a board member. If you don't have those finance documents and you haven't had a chance to go through them, it's going to be a lot harder to participate in that board discussion and to talk about questions that you have about some gaps or potential problems you see coming up. Up-to-date, accurate financials for an organization overall. When you're a smaller organization, you don't yet need to have an audit, but this is something that you want to be working towards as you get larger and larger, and then when you hit a certain budget size, it is required by law. But those up-to-date, accurate financials are important, and they're something that should be in the board member's hands. And we've talked about this now in a couple of different ways, but ongoing training and educational opportunities. I don't care whether you're downloading all of my webinars that are sitting on YouTube and you're using that. I don't care if you're going to BoardSource and you're getting that. I don't care if you've got a board member who's been on several boards and they're going to do a training with your board members, but finding out how are you going to grow as board members and how are you going to really know what to do. This will stop a lot of what we see in boards where we're getting together in those meetings and we come in somewhat passively. We come and we hear the reports from the staff members, see if they do a good job. Some of us feel like asking critical questions makes us seem more involved. Some of us are doing work in between those meetings. Some of us are not. But if you really take it on as that, just as you would if this were a corporate board opportunity, if you were being paid $150,000 to sit on that board, what would you be doing and how would it be different than what you are doing today? I would suggest that this is one of those things, is really getting yourself training. And I mentioned the governance committee, making sure that you have a committee. A lot of time our governance committee acts like our executive committee, so they're the same. But if you really have a committee that is dedicated to the growth and development of your board, they are going to be looking at these training opportunities. They're going to look at, wow, we are so great at pulling off events. We're so great at introducing people. Something's going wrong on sponsorship. We are not getting corporate people in. How do we change that? And then they're going to look at how do we grow the board in that way. Maybe there's conflict at the board meetings, or maybe there's not enough conflict. And I just say people need to be speaking up. They need to be talking about potential problems. So your governance committee should be looking at that kind of functioning of your board. A strategic plan. I think that it's really important that an organization has this. When I work with really small organizations, or what I've done for my own business is what I call like a mini strategic plan. Sometimes if you're at that really early stage, a mini strategic plan could be about a page long, but something where you have an idea of your direction. As nonprofits and often being underfunded, we're often moving from day to day, activity to activity, program to program, and not getting a good sight of the bigger picture. For many of us last year, right, the pandemic was like a tsunami hitting us. What could we have had in place that allowed us to better weather that time? Maybe nothing. Maybe everything we did was fine. There were a lot of things that we couldn't see, but it's worth it to sit and ask yourself if there were things that you could have foreseen or things that you could have had in place that would have allowed you to be more effective during this last year. And lastly, I'm going to say a balanced budget. If anybody is at an organization that's carrying debt, I'm not asking you to run crying from the webinar. It's more something to say, how do we build towards that then? If we're in a situation where we're not running a balanced budget, how do we figure that out? How do we pay down debt over time? What are the plans we're putting in place around that? So we have a few chats here, so I'm just going to pull those up. Okay, and someone's also saying that Candid has some good resources, candid.org. So thank you for sharing that. I love when you guys support each other. All right, so I went through a lot there, and I'm going to hope you remember it, because I'm going to ask you, of all those things that we went through, in fact, I might even go back and keep it on the screen while we do this. So of all these things we talked about, what percentage do you feel your organization has already provided you? Is it 25% or less? Is it 50%, 75, up to 100%? So I'm going to launch it. So of all these things I've shared, how much do you think your organization has currently been providing you? Good. I really enjoy watching the race of the answers. Almost everyone has voted here. 50% seems to be winning here. So I would say, that's good. And I feel like that's pretty typical, right? We do have a couple people that say up to 100%. And I'm going to end polling now. We're going to share results. So this is good, right? It's a good start that we have about 50%. And I'm glad that I'm sharing things here that you can now take it to the next level. I believe really strongly in progress, not perfection. So if you're at 50%, I want to get you to 75. It's not that we need to think it's a tragedy that we're not at 100 yet. Okay, so that's really important to me, particularly when we talk at the kind of staffing levels that are at nonprofits. It's all about growth. It's not about making anybody wrong for not having already been there. Okay, so now let's look at what the organization is expecting of you. And as I've stated, I don't think organizations are always really great at sharing these things. Sometimes they are. Sometimes they have given you a job description or a binder. And sometimes they haven't. So let's kind of look at it a little bit more deeply. This is something I did excerpt from BoardSource. We're not going to go over it here, but you can adapt something that's for your own organization, and it's a board readiness quiz. So it's just really, and this is for those of you looking at joining a board, looking at some of these things here that you're interested in advancing a cause you feel passionate about. I think that's obviously number one. It makes a lot of sense. But as you start going beyond that, looking at number 4, interested in meeting people outside of your usual professional and social circle, understanding the roles and responsibilities, being comfortable making a personal contribution to the organization, be that time, money, etc. Asking other people to contribute financially is a really important part of the role. Being able to accommodate the meetings. So if that's something that just isn't, it's just not able to happen for you, it's really something you should look at before you decide to be on a board, because again, you do have a fiduciary responsibility to the organization. I also thought these were interesting, like being patient and collegial when working as a team. Some people are fantastic, but not necessarily fantastic as a group. And so just knowing that about yourself is important. So looking at what the organization's expecting of you. So if we talked about this role, one of the things is it's staying at this high level strategic questions. The staff, because they're in the day-to-day work, may not always be able to bring their minds to that place. So some people are naturally just more strategic thinkers. Maybe the leaders of the organization are having glimpses of thinking about that, or maybe they're the ones coming to you and saying, I have this great idea, or I know where you need to be in 5 years, or here's a program area that's not being met in our area. But this is really where your role is, and always looking at that day-to-day work and reconnecting it back up to the mission and the bigger ideas. Monitoring the financial performance. Is your organization doing what it needs to stay financially sound? If people are not making good choices on the staff level, then that can be a problem. And we're not looking, again, we're not going to be going in and reviewing petty cash receipts and that kind of thing. You're looking, again, for these higher levels, being able to look at the reports. But if that's not being handled on the staff side, making sure that somebody is in place to do that. Sometimes that has to be a volunteer board member. Reading your board documents before meetings so you contribute meaningfully to your meetings. I thought this was so interesting. Always increasing your social, political, and reputation capital. This is really important because this is how you're going to grow, and this is how your organization is going to grow. And, honestly, staying out of those day-to-day operations, sometimes board members lose sight of the fact that they are supposed to be this high strategic level, and sometimes they're natural doers, and so they want to get down into that work themselves. I know for me, because I work on the nonprofit side, it would be very easy for me to get down into the weeds sometimes, but it's really important. The board role is a higher level role. Now, let's say you have an organization that has no paid staff and you're all volunteers. Well, in that case, as board members, you are acting as the staff until paid staff start to arrive onto the scene or until you have volunteers doing that. So I'm not speaking about those situations. I'm really speaking those in which you have staff and the board member starts to come into that situation. And accepting fundraising responsibilities. And I have those detailed out here because they are really important and they are going to take up a lot of your board time. So introducing your contacts to staff members, asking your contacts and others for a gift. Some people find it more comfortable to ask people that they know, and some people find it less comfortable to ask people that they know, but both are really required for this type of work. Attending donor visits. So if your organization is starting to meet with high-level donors and asking their questions about the organization and talking about a program and they're thinking about funding at a high level, being that board member that attends those meetings and is able to answer questions intelligently about the work of the organization and share your passion as an unpaid person, that can be incredibly meaningful and really help with those donor asks and visits. Writing letters to your contacts and others, buying event tables. Oh, and there's a typo there, bringing event sponsors. So these are all things that are expected of you as a board member. I'm going to stop and ask if anyone has questions or thoughts or concerns, or actually just wants to say how much they hate fundraising or how much they love fundraising. All is helpful. Okay, we'll keep going. All right. So now we are going to check in on your organizational expectations. And I'm going to ask if your organization clearly spelled out their expectations when you first joined the board. So the answers are yes, no, sort of. We have a lot of sort of. Sort of definitely looks like it's winning. And you can see, I mean, sort of is a very funny answer because, you know, the questions really clearly spell out. If it's sort of, I would say it's not that clear, right? And those of you who are on the nonprofit side, I really want you to take note of this, right? So if our board members are coming away with sort of or no, I'm going to end polling now and share results, which it looks like the majority of people are, then we're not doing what we need to do to make sure that the board is best set to succeed. All right, so what do you need to do your job well? Some of this we've covered, but we're going to go in a little bit more granular for some of this. So part of it is documentation, right? So I always bring a lot of the board relationship down to that recruitment time because that's, again, where we're setting expectations between the board member and the organization. And so these explicit board documents are something that could be available right at the beginning, right? So job descriptions, fundraising requirements. If you're lucky enough to have staff, and organizational charts that shows who everyone is and who you're supposed to talk to. Committee descriptions. What are you supposed to do? How do you know which committee you want to join or what they do or who you need to ask if you have a question? Network requirements. So are they looking for someone who's going to introduce a lot of people? Are they looking for someone who's just bringing in corporate support? What's really there, and you want to get that, you want to really get that spelled out for you as a board member, and a board manual that's got, you know, that annual calendar, that's got bylaws of the last few meetings that are minutes from the last few meetings and bylaws. So you want all of those materials being handed to you when you join that board, or really when you're in the recruitment process for some of those. Good policies. So again, I mentioned BoardSource has a lot of this documentation, but for instance, the conflict of interest policy. So that would just state that, for instance, if I'm on a board and I am a nonprofit consultant, I can't just say, I'm going to vote that you hire me and they're going to pay me twice my usual rate. That would obviously be a conflict of interest. So a conflict of interest would allow me to remove myself from that vote, or to remove myself from the board if I was going to do any work for the organization, et cetera. A whistleblower policy that allows staff and board members to be protected if they need to speak up about something going on at the organization. Board and officer insurance is something that's really helpful. That was something that when I was on a board, I was really happy to have, that knowing that the organization had protected me. Again, when you get to a particular budget size, having an independent audit of finances. So this left column here, these are very hard-nosed things that you can see whether you have them or you don't have them, right? But let's go to the column on the right, because these are a little harder to interpret, but are really essential as well. So let's look at open dialogue. If you're looking at your own organization, would you say that your board meetings look like one person talking? Is there room for dissent? Now, it doesn't mean that it's angry dissent. We're not looking for angry dissent or conflict, but we are looking for multiple people to be speaking up, sharing their point of view, asking questions, and getting to a place where the majority of the people can vote and decide on something. That is one of the signs of an effective board. Oh, there's a great question here. Are family members considered a conflict? So I guess the short answer is yes. You can have family members on a board, but they usually have to be limited to a low percentage of the board. And so if they are a high percentage, you could have a problem where they're acting as a voting bloc, and some funders will not fund organizations in which they can see there's a lot of family relationships on that board. So I guess the short answer is yes. Trust, candor, and respect. This is also a condition. Again, you can see this in open dialogue, but it's also the type of dialogue. So we talked about if there's a lot of angry dialogue, I would say that trust and respect is missing. Maybe candor is present, but trust and respect is not. We want to create a safe environment where everybody feels free to talk, but not everybody's going to get their way. Not only one opinion will prevail, but everybody will have an opportunity to speak up, and that they will be listened to with respect. That's really, really important. If that's constantly being squashed down, I would really look at how you can change that culture in your organization. And I would start with governance committee, and I would start with trainings. How do you, Crucial Conversations is a fantastic book on having challenging conversations. It's one that I've taught about, and I have used in my personal and my work life many, many times. But that's a place that you can begin to increase the respectful communication that's happening. Intentional board design. I have to say, I was kind of late to coming to the necessity for a board having this level of attention, planning, and training. Coming from the staff side and really coming from a fundraising perspective, my concern was really basically around what kind of resources a board member was bringing and what kind of resources they were inviting other people to bring. That was my sole concern. And the board, whether they were effective or they were not effective, really wasn't that much of my attention at the time. And I really just come to see that it's, as I said at the beginning, it's absolutely critical that the board is an effective institution, that it is looking over the well-being of the organization, that they're challenging themselves. You want board members challenging themselves. You want them growing as individuals and growing as team members. And if that's the kind of board experience you want, I invite you to create that in your organizations, to look for ways that you can grow and ways that you can grow other people, and to recruit other candidates committed to that. One thing that I have found is that on the nonprofit side, sometimes when we share low expectations for our board members, we're like, oh, no, you're so great, please come on. People live into our low expectations, and that also it's not a fun, engaging experience. I think about things that are effective and organizations I've seen do well, whether it's volunteers, whether it's staff, or whether it's board. People had a lot asked of them, and as such, felt a great deal of personal respect for themselves and for the organization because they were asked to live up to a high expectation. And so I really invite you to bring that into your organization and to gently and kindly allow the people who don't want to live up to that off of your board into a place where they can be part of committees, they can be part of other things, but allow them to be part of something bigger than themselves. That's what your board is an opportunity to be. It's just something really exciting for you, for the world, and for yourself and for each other. Look at me spending so much time on intentional board design. Well-organized meetings, that's just something, it's really small, but it is also really frustrating. If the only experience you're having of that organization is essentially those meetings and maybe occasional visits to programs or things like that, your whole experience of the board is going to be based on those meetings. And so if that's something that isn't working, see if you can work with your nonprofit to help that become more streamlined. Maybe you can be part of providing an agenda that works, getting groups of people to be part of that process and organizing, getting training maybe for the people leading those meetings. But it is really essential that those are well-organized meetings. I'm going to stop there for questions. Okay. So these are my resources as part of the nonprofit coach team. So we do transformational coaching on fundraising effectiveness. We have a program that is 15 hours a year, so you're meeting a couple of times a month, and we're going over everything from board training to fundraising, things like that, and we're going to help you move from the beginning to the end. If you move to the next program, where it's the coaching plus the program support, you can see there's a few extra hours, so I can do more hands-on document creation for you, or someone on the team can. We also have an online grant writing course right on the website. You can just buy it. Once you get an approval, then you have access to the videos and the documents and you begin a grant writing training. This is really great if you've got some people on your staff who are being asked to grant write, but this is not their training. It's a good way for them to get into that. But I am going to emphasize here today, board trainings and retreats is something that I do and that people on my team do, and that also I'm working on developing a full program of board development over the course of a year, because I can see how much it is really needed for organizations to get to that higher level. We do all kinds of consulting, individual giving, marketing, grant writing. I also, this is for your executive directors, we have executive director support sessions that are currently free and quarterly. So if you see those come out on either the email or on the website, keep paying attention to those. They could just come in. We don't record them or put them on the internet. We just allow people to talk about the concerns they're having, things they're struggling with, and the executive directors help support each other. And I do some coaching in that. If you are interested in any past topics, so on YouTube under my name and on the website, we have some past webinars. I will say the YouTube is far more up to date. So if you're really looking to dive into anything about virtual events, grant writing, things like that, it's a great place to just kind of have a crash course. All right, we do have a chat here. Let's see. Finding potential board members, how and where? What an excellent question. Yeah, that could be an entire session itself. You do want to look at your personal relationships, right? So you want to look at those, and you want to, the first thing I would say is you want to be able to map out who is on your board, their strengths, their skills, and what they have to offer. Then you want to look for the places where things are missing. So then, whether they're from your own network or they're farther afield, you're then bringing in somebody who fits one of those missing pieces. It's really common for people to say recruit their best friend, and they recruit their best friend. And boards can get really out of balance when suddenly you have a whole friend group on a board and a few other people. All of a sudden, we stop having open dialogue and we stop having candor, and we start kind of going based on one person's opinion and everyone's ways. So that's the first thing, is really look at what you're missing. What skills are there? Do you have a lawyer? Do you have somebody who has an issue area expertise based on your nonprofit? The other thing then I would say is really doing some research in your area. You can be looking up other nonprofits in the area, other leaders, and figuring out, how do I get in front of those people? The other thing that's really important as organizations, and I know it's harder in the pandemic, is to constantly be part of activities like this. Meet other potential board members, go to events, go to your Chamber of Commerce, meet other business professionals. This is where you're going to start meeting the right types of people to be able to recruit to your board. So those are the 3 areas I would say. Any other questions like that? All right. Well, if you think of any questions, feel free to reach out to us. This is the email address where you could ask about additional services or just ask questions. And that's the website there if you're interested in finding past webinars. Thank you very much for joining today. And I'm going to stay on a few minutes in case people have a few questions. You're welcome, David. Thanks for joining.
This is just informational. This is C. Kelly Wright. I've been taking lots of notes, so much that my just a little scrambled. So I hope a few people have the presence to ask questions because that one was great. And we are in the process of building the board right now and using some of your materials. So thank you very much, Elizabeth. I can say you have served us well at Harlem Late Night Jazz. So we really appreciate it. And we've submitted for 3 grants over the last 30 days. So
fantastic. That's so great to hear, Kelly. Great work.
Yeah, so we'll be looking to speak to you again really soon. Thank you.
Oh, that's awesome. Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you. I'm done.
Anyone else have questions? Oh, hey, David's saying he's in Harlem. Ooh. Kelly, if you would chat out your website so David and other people can find it. I will say that Harlem Late Night Jazz is an awesome organization. I love jazz music, and I love Kelly and her team over there. They're fantastic.
Thank you so much. And thank you. And hello, guys. I am, again, C. Kelly Wright, and I'm a co-founder and board secretary with Harlem Late Night Jazz. Our website is harlemlatenightjazz.org. We are a 501c3 operating here in New York with the mission to keep the music alive in Harlem. And we encourage you all to join the mission and support the mission. Woohoo. Thank you for that platform, Elizabeth.
You're welcome. Does anyone else have questions while they're here? So Jackie has a question about how we find more info about the executive director support sessions. So they are on the website, the nonprofitcoach.guru, and we have one quarterly. So I think one is coming up next month, but it is listed on the website. Also, by joining the webinar, you will get some follow-up emails, and we do promote those, so you'll see those. Most of the emails are really just more of these types of sessions, so totally just free webinars twice a month. Anyone else have questions about board? Oh, so there's another question of whether these slides will be shared to us or not. So we do email out a recording of the whole session afterwards. So you'll be able to see the slides then, and I can ask whether we can send just the slides as well. Great questions. Oh, thank you. The other thing that I would suggest too is if you want to ask questions about board is sometimes other organizations, people have just gone through a similar experience and they can share their experience. I'm actually going to stop recording and see if, since we've got 10 extra minutes, if anybody wants to just talk and share their questions and concerns with each other. So thank you everyone for joining the webinar.